Hey guys, question that's come in from another YouTube visitor. What do I need to really believe and apply the presuppositions of NLP in my daily life and not just know them intellectually? And the presupposition in particular that the individual is commenting on is that there's no failure, only feedback. So, well, with any belief, in order to believe it, you need to accept it as true. That's one way. But the cool thing is you don't actually need to accept anything as true. You can use the as if frame and you can try on any particular presupposition or idea or worldview and then act as if it were true. And by doing so, it allows you to experience the world from that particular frame of reference. In the context of, it sounds like the readers had a bit of a challenge in terms of accepting that there's no there's no failure, there's only feedback. Well, that particular presupposition gets a lot of people. And the way that you want to think about it is that the mind and how the mind works is we stick labels on stuff. And in order for you to call something a failure, you, the individual, have to go along and take some situation. For example, if I wanted to swim across, there's a river nearby here and I want to swim across the river. And if I didn't swim across the river within 60 seconds, let's just say I call that a failure. In order for a failure to occur, there has to be a mind, there has to be somebody thinking, somebody labeling, and there has to be some criteria, a boundary that defines what's inside the failure and what's outside a failure, what we could call a success. So, in order to accept that actually there's only feedback and there's failure per se does exist, it's not saying like the NLP presuppositions aren't true, they're not empirically true. Technically, of course, one can describe an event, for example, like me swimming across the river, and if I don't do it in 60 seconds, then I failed to achieve the goal of swimming across the river in 60 seconds. What the presuppositions of NLP are about is adopting a particularly useful way of looking and orientating your behavior and thoughts around the world so that you tend to get more of what you want. See, because if you've got this idea in your head that anything you do, if you don't achieve the target at the time frame or the criteria you've used to set it, then it's a failure. Then oftentimes what a lot of people do is that when they experience failure, they tend to apply it to themselves, particularly if they've repeated that failure several times, and then they go, I'm a failure, and they identify to it. And of course, when you start thinking that you're a failure or that you always fail, which is another way of approaching failure, and thinking that you always fail at something, what happens for most people is it acts as a demotivator, and they tend to have thoughts around it that lead them to go, actually, I don't want to do that again. That hurts, that's painful. So you can take the approach, if you're having a difficult time accepting that there's no such thing as failure, there's only feedback. One, loosen up the grip. It's not that absolutely there's no failure, as I've already mentioned. Two, is to begin to take into account the costs of holding that belief, that idea in your head. The fact that what's it going to cost you, not just in terms of what it's cost you today, yesterday, last month, last year, but in the future, if you continue to hold that idea that effectively what's more important is the failure component rather than the feedback. Now, if we shift for a moment, and if you think about the presupposition that there is only feedback, that worldview, when you orientate your mind and accept that as true and act as if that is true, because when you begin to act as if it's true, you begin to find that result tends to show up more and more in your life. What you'll notice is that when you set a goal or an outcome or some context, and if it doesn't work out, like for example swimming across the river in 60 seconds, if that doesn't occur, rather than putting a label on it and going as a failure, what you actually think is, hey, I've just done something, I've produced a result, and now I've gotten feedback, and the feedback was that it took me 75 seconds to get across the river. Now I can become curious, and when I become curious I can go, okay, what occurred that resulted in me taking 75 seconds to get across the water? And then I can look at what can I improve. Maybe it's my stroke, maybe it's my breathing pattern, maybe it's the speed at which I pushed off the bank, etc. I can now begin to identify where I can improve my behavior, my operation, my performance that will lead to the goal. So for you, the individual at home, if that's one of your things, try that out. Try just acting as if that everything you do, every result that occurs is actually feedback. And then how does that change your thinking when you treat it as feedback and when you orientate your thinking to go, okay, I got feedback here, what's the result I'm looking to pursue? and what adjustment in my behavior and my performance will I take as a consequence of getting this feedback. And I guarantee you, if you do that and you go out there and you look to improve your performance and you find others who have, for example, achieved in that particular area, you will in time very quickly continually improve. You won't be like people who are always thinking that it's a failure and then eventually lead to thinking that I'm a failure or I can never achieve that, and so are stopped, and so are almost guaranteed that the conclusion they'll have is that they failed and that they weren't able to do it. Versus if you adopt the NLP worldview, is it's not that failure doesn't exist per se, because remember, there's a mind that can call something a failure, but that when you come from the point of view of that it's feedback, using the feedback to improve your performance, to reduce that gap between your desired state of what you're trying to achieve, where you are right now, your present state, and then what resources you need to bring to bear to improve that bit of the performance. So I hope that's useful. Try it out. Try out acting as if, and any of the presuppositions you can do this with, by the way, not just that one. And if you have any other questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.